Court cases on in Canada against an HIV-positive man of Ugandan origin accused of infecting 12 women with the virus. 53-year-old Johnson Aziga is accused of having unprotected sex with at least 12 women without informing them that he was living with the virus. 2 of the women have died. That is why Aziga is now facing double murder charges. Here in Kenya, no one has yet been taken to court for infecting another with HIV. But some activists are warning that a case like Aziga's might soon be replayed in the Kenyan courts. They cite Clause 24 of the HIV and AIDS Prevention and Control Act of 2006 as the weapon some people might use to victimize their HIV-positive counterparts. Kenyans in different towns across the country had different views.
It won't work because you can't know somebody's status. That is one thing. And you can't know that I'm HIV positive or I'm HIV negative. So it's so hard for that to happen.
You know, once people know that if you infect somebody knowing that you're infecting the person and you'll be put in jail or you'll be charged in the court of law, then definitely this will help reduce the rate of infection.
If the doctor would be in a position to establish that you are HIV and AIDS positive, and then they say that is not supposed to be disclosed, at the same time they want to get rid of it, I think that is a double edge. The only thing that is supposed to be done is that immediately Mr. Joseph Onyango is known to have been contracted with HIV/AIDS. This is something that should be made public so that people are aware of what is happening.
The first part of the clause states that a person who is and is aware of being infected with HIV or is carrying and is aware of carrying the HIV shall take all reasonable measures and precautions to prevent the transmission of HIV to others. Otiende Amolo is one of the lawyers who contributed to the drafting of the act. He says that many citizens who were consulted thought it necessary to have legislation against intentional infection. But there are many questions law might not be able to answer adequately.
How do you prove that I am the one who infected you today and that you are not infected before? It would mean you must have been tested perhaps the previous day. And with the window period, how do you demonstrate that?
As such, he says that piece of legislation is intended to address only outrageous behavior. United Nations guidelines on HIV legislation state that governments shall intensify efforts to enact, strengthen or enforce legislation, regulations and other measures to eliminate all forms of discrimination against and to ensure the full enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms by people living with HIV and members of vulnerable groups, overcoming legal, regulatory or other barriers that block access to commodities and services. It is in line with these guidelines that Amolo argues for the HIV Act.
As long as you don't know, and as long as it cannot be shown that you knew, then you are scot-free. And that's the idea. The idea is not to try and convict as many people as possible. No. The idea is only to try and convict those who engage in really, really outrageous conduct.
The second part of the Act states that a person living with HIV shall not knowingly and recklessly place another person at risk of becoming infected with HIV unless the other person knew that fact and voluntarily accepted the risk of being infected.
Recklessness in law is not just a matter of a mother feeding a baby and then infecting. Knowingly and recklessly connotes a situation where you set out, in the example I gave you, the Cameroon nurse who was living with her husband, and the husband too had 2 children from a previous marriage, and she decided that these 2 children were interfering with her life. So she goes, and she's a nurse, she goes, draws blood from the hospital, goes to the children's school, and then tells the teacher that my husband asked me to vaccinate them against polio.
That is what Amolo calls outrageous, the act that should take one to court and most probably to prison. Anne Soy, KTN Weekend Prime.